Welcome back on the AM show. We kickstart our big stories, and of course, since we've already spoken about sports, we're going to be getting into the economy and the budget statement for 2023. Let me say a very good morning to Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lanza.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I nearly called you my pizza CBD.
You're used to having me at this time.
Did you notice the pause? I paused just a little before I mentioned
Because you're
your name.
mischievous, I assumed it was one of your things. Good morning.
But you're rocking it this morning.
Thank you.
It's a lovely outfit.
Thank you.
So before we go over the phone lines and everything, what are your takeaways from yesterday?
The income budget, rechristened Sika Pedidi budget by the minority in Parliament. So, I mean, we've gone over the highlights of the budget, Benjamin, and the biggest question on my mind really is, does this reduce the economic burden on the Ghanaian? Because for many people, that's what they were looking forward to. Will things be made easier for me, or will I have to brace myself for the worst? People were excited about the e-levy until they were reminded of the fact that the 100 cedi threshold was taking off. A few other points on the bonds, which a lot of people are concerned about. We've had people reach out to us personally as journalists to tell us about their experiences when they go to disinvest and what they're told about their capital being reduced after some recalculation, and people are already upset by it. So we'll need more clarity on that. We just heard the Deputy Finance Minister talk about the fact that we'll get more on that when the debt restructuring program is outlined. But Benjamin, for me, the biggest question is, does this really help the Ghanaian? Talk about that. How do these all translate into how you feel in your pocket, how you're able to manage your home, how you're able to manage your business? We'll see what the experts think as we look at it in the general sense and holistically, Benjamin.
Well, let's kickstart the conversation. The minority has described it as an competitive budget and one that will bring untold misery to the ordinary Ghanaian. Well, let's get on to the connections and speak to Professor Godfred Bokpin. He is with the University of Ghana Business School. He joins us for that conversation. Prof, a very good morning to you.
Yes, good morning. Good morning to your panelists and then your cherished viewers.
Okay. Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lanza, my colleague, is also here. She'll also be interacting with you. But let's kickstart the conversation.
Good morning to us also.
Right. Let's start from the most basic point. What is your general, fundamental, appreciation of what happened yesterday, the budget presentation?
Oh, I would say I was disappointed.
Disappointed?
But yes, disappointed, but not surprised.
Okay.
I was disappointed because government failed to communicate truth to Ghanaians on time.
Okay.
And created the impression that what independent-minded people were putting out there was not true. They created a false confidence and hope that things weren't as bad as the data suggested. I'm disappointed because you know what? When we say this, it's not like we don't like Ghana. We are on course to create a financially repressed society. That's where we are heading towards. We are presenting 2023 budget on the premises that COVID-19 has affected the government and Russia, Ukraine. But COVID did not only affect the government. COVID affected individuals and households. COVID affected private sector firms in as much as it also affected the government. Now, if you look across Africa, emerging markets, and advanced countries, and you look at the recovery measures they are thinking through and putting in place, Ghana is in the opposite direction. Why am I saying so? Since COVID came, if you look at government tax measures so far, it looks as though households and businesses had exceptional resilience to COVID-19 other than government. And therefore, government resolve to balance its books must excessively be loaded on households and firms. The strength of every economy lies in the strength of households' balance sheet and the private sector. We are eroding that. We are eroding that. I will get into a bit more specific here. When we have concluded that the future is actually digitization, that the digital economy is what holds the key to greater economic transformation and inclusive productivity growth, then they introduced e-levy. Since COVID came, government has introduced COVID levy, sanitation levy, and all of that. Then we saw how government was preparing to further financially repressed Ghanaians when they decided to treat Get Fund, NHLs, and the others as straight levies. And that created a kind of false hope that our VAT was perhaps the lowest in Africa at 12.5%, when the average probably was around 16.4% or so. But to the final consumer, VAT is not 12.5%. To the final consumer, there is all these straight levies. And to make matters worse, government now has also increased the VAT rate, rather than exploring efficiency within the existing tax or tax types. Studies have shown that when your VAT rate is 18% or above 18%, it significantly inhibits growth. In other words, it becomes counterproductive. So if you look at effectively the implication of the VAT and the treatment of straight levies, it effectively puts the VAT burden on the consumer in excess of 20%. What that does is to contribute to the high productive cost base of doing business, and naturally defeat every attempt to build savings mobilization. When it happens that way, it's going to be difficult for the average Ghanaian to actually build reserves and take advantage of the limited economic opportunity that will be created. There is no future in that. What that does is to undermine private sector competitiveness as we go deeper into the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. I fear for Ghana. Instead of government...
Did you just say you feared for Ghana?
Of course. It's not, we are not saying... This is not like saying you are a prophet of doom or something. The data is clear. Can you tell me where government has listed programs, interventions? Can they demonstrate to us the impact of such programs in the last 6 years? How many people have we lifted out of poverty? How have these programs narrowed inequality?
Right.
We are interested in impact, not just, look, intervention here, 1D, 1F, 1D, youth start. What is the impact? Over 14 million Ghanaians are multidimensionally poor.
And those are some stark points you're making. My colleague, Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lanza, will come in because we still have to look at the e-levy. We still have to look at VAT, go deeper into the VAT situation. But I'd just like to find out from you before she goes to those points. I was just, sharing my blunt thoughts today, and brown bread, when you buy one at 16 cedis, almost 17 cedis, you're paying a tax component of over 2 cedis, 70 pesos. And guess what? In there, we also have the COVID-19 levy, still at 1%. Yes. How relevant is that in these times?
We made it look as though COVID only affected us. Okay. And we are unsure when COVID levy will go, probably as a permanent tax handle or so. But what makes it worse is where, when the private sector messes up, the private sector is asked to pay the price. When the government messes up, the government gets away with it. The government is getting away with it. The president is still keeping that large government size, which is counterproductive. This is insensitivity at the highest level. I'm sorry to say this. There's nothing burden sharing in this.
Right, Prof. So, at this stage in the Ghanaian economy, we know what is happening. We're going to the IMF. We've heard of a freeze on employment in the public sector, hiring for the civil service. We know how this is directly linked to the IMF. We're expecting to see a more detailed debt restructuring program. What would you say should have been government's approach, considering the fact that there may be conditions that the IMF would want to see included in this budget before approving our support program? And considering that, yes, indeed, we need to alleviate the burden that the Ghanaian is suffering, how should government have gone about this for you?
You know what? The point you are making is the price we are paying for a government that failed to listen to advice when it matters most. The delay in making the call to the IMF, government denial of the reality, that's the price we are paying for.
So, Prof, are you saying that because government didn't heed calls from experts and analysts like yourself and took a late decision to go to the IMF, there's really nothing we could have done about this budget? It is the best we could have gotten.
Yeah, because, we were not only saying the government should go to the IMF. We were saying that if you were not going to go in that way, then this is a natural medicine. Downsize the size of government immediately as a strong signal to the market. What you need to do as alternative to go to the IMF, the government didn't do that. And the government equally didn't make the call. The optimal time to have approached the IMF was actually the last quarter of last year. Inflation wouldn't have been where it is right now if we had made that call. The cedi wouldn't have depreciated the way it has if government had acted proactively. Now, to make matters worse, because government was denying the truth, government's own approach and lack of decisiveness in communicating to the market, its debt level and what will be done, that in itself fueled uncertainty in the market. But the market is smarter than the government. So the market saw and read meaning into the debt dynamics. And that is why when you go and seek early redemption of your investment in the market was already pricing the haircut. The market, because one important function of the market is price discovery. Okay? Now you have inflation officially at 40.4%. Yields across all instruments are already negative. This is financially repressing. On top of that, when it comes to debt restructuring and the rest of them, the most important thing is to communicate to the market and ease the uncertainty. We fail to do that. Even as at now, government hasn't comprehensively disclosed to the market what exactly they want to do. And you come and tell me that debt exchange is not haircut. Any decision government takes that dislocates investors from the original position. It's a haircut.
Right. So would you say
It's nothing
that,
but realized investor losses.
Prof, would you say that what is contained in the budget will put us on course to correcting those mishaps, as you have put it?
It's a painful price. It's a painful price.
But would it put us on course?
Certainly, to come out of this, we have to go through some painful fiscal adjustments. Yes.
And would you say that those adjustments contained in the budget will help us achieve that goal?
Yeah, at the macro level, but the greater price that will be paid in correcting that is too much loaded on households and the private sector. That is the point that we are making. So we have said that there's a price that we have to pay to get out of this. And unfortunately, the adverse distributional effect of that may lean more towards households and the private sector, the vulnerable, the socially excluded.
Prof, even as you speak of the vulnerable, it's interesting. I would have paused for later, but you brought in the bond exchange situation. So I'll just bring that situation up. We had an interaction with Dr. John Kuma yesterday, post the budget presentation. And I don't know what you call it, debt exchange, debt restructuring. But he makes mention of the fact that bondholders, local or domestic bondholders, are going to suffer some sort of 30% haircut. And in fact, in 2023, they'll earn nothing. In 2024, they will get 5%. In 2025, they'll get 10%. And it's only in 2026 that, there'll be a restoration to their normal levels. The problem there is that these coupons are what pensioners, for example, rely on. Just how bad could this be when implemented?
Yeah, that is precisely the point that we are making. That all of this leads to a financially repressed society. That may sound like a big word, but if you open it up, you'll find all these things, higher inflation and its impact on savings and debt risk and all of that. They are all leading towards that goal. That's the point that I was making, okay? So, for instance, and when you do all this and then you say that is not realized investor losses, what would that be? Nobody goes to the market to go and make a loss. That's why we don't wash our face upward. Okay. So, and the point is that, you see, I don't know how we should put it, but I think that we must be very careful we don't push people beyond the point where they'll be able to tolerate.
Are we getting there? Are we getting to breaking point, or are we already there?
That is the part that we are heading towards. And especially when you don't see greater commitment on the part of government in internalizing that austerity. So if you tell me that don't drive V8 in Accra, who monitors that? If I see V8 leaving from East Legon, do I conclude it's going to Central Region?
I'm grateful that you've brought this up, Doc, because for me...
Let me give you an example. Not long ago, we said, under a certain regime, that let's give government vehicles a certain special plate to avoid abuse. Did we achieve that goal? So what you do, you see, those things that are difficult to monitor doesn't show real commitment to burden sharing.
Right.
What you do, is easier to monitor if you're saying, I'm reducing my number of ministers to below 40. This is my commitment on the table, and I want you to come along. Why did Côte d'Ivoire choose to reduce the number of ministers from 41 to 32? Look at the data the government itself presented, the outlook for the next 3 years. See where Côte d'Ivoire is heading towards. See where Ghana is heading towards. When Russia started firing guns, Côte d'Ivoire decided to remove certain import duties on wheat and freeze a diesel price adjustment because it disproportionately affects the poor and the rest of them. Countries have choices to make.
Right, Prof. Benjamin, I said I was grateful Prof brought in the angle of the V8.
Right.
The
So
ban
V8s and V6
and
vehicles
V6 vehicles being
restricted
banned
to
only
cross-country
cross-country. You
travel.
know, it's the same thing that came to mind. A few years back, we said we were going to give them government vehicles specific number plates so that it could be they could be easily identified.
Which is what we are trying to
Which
do
is what
again.
again. So
Right.
then, so clearly, it's the same thing that came to my mind. How are we going to ensure that this will actually work? But Prof, there are those who say that government is trying to pull the smart one at Ghanaians with the reduction of the e-levy from 1.5 to 1% and then increasing VAT in the same breath. They say, look, you might as well have just kept the e-levy at what it is and maintained the threshold than reduce it to 1% and, you know, clear the threshold, because then it brings us back to square one. Do you agree?
In fact, it's a negative sum game. It's not a zero-sum game. It's a negative sum game on the ultimate consumer. When it comes to multinationals, when it comes to politically connected businesses, they have exemptions. The average Ghanaian today has no exemption. We can't continue like this. We recognize that there are challenges, but we need to be mindful. At the heart of policy is human beings, not trees.
Are you suggesting this administration, especially with this Nkabom budget, is not going to bring about Nkabom? Is going to bring about something apart from that, and it's not going to inure to the benefit of the ordinary Ghanaian?
It's going to take a long time, and perhaps by the time the fruits start coming, a good number of people would have checked in the cemetery.
You mean people are going to lose their lives over this budget?
Not over this, but you know, we are creating economic frictions. Okay, please, as we speak today, vulnerable employment is high in the rural areas compared to the urban and peri-urban areas. It's high, particularly among females than males. The rural ecosystem that supports life has been disintegrated by galamsey and a lack of rural development. A couple of decades ago, life was difficult in the urban areas. You ran to the village. What we have today. You know, when we say it's not like we don't like anybody, we have been consistent in our comments across regimes that the way we are going, if we are not careful, particularly if we don't have strong social protection and safety net, we may get to the point where people will willingly choose death over life because it's going to be difficult. We recognize, look, and that is why we have said that Ghanaians had no idea the level of fiscal adjustment that we have to go through in order to create the mess that has been created. Because how debt is managed considerably influences the soundness and solvency of the overall public sector balance sheet. And for that matter, has implications for financial sector stability. You know what? The traditional view, which is still relevant, is that the financial system is ultimately the residual risk claimant of public debt overhang. And that is why we must all, and we have said before that, you know, okay, so the pain becomes much unbearable when you find that the burden sharing is disproportionately against households and the private sector. That is the point. And that is why we are saying that the government missed that decisive point when it failed to show leadership in downsizing and greater restructuring, realignment of state-owned enterprises. If you check since 2017, the number of other state institutions that have been created that are almost doing the same thing. And they all receive budgetary allocations. And actually, they're actually not doing much on the ground. We can talk about some development authorities created, Northern Development Days, this, that. They all
Prof,
they all receive budgetary allocations, but really, effectively, what are they doing?
It's a good question you're posing, and that is a question that many of us have posed. But let's look on the brighter side. Are there no positives to this budget? I mean, there are other things we want to run by you. For example, in terms of social interventions, LEAP is going to see higher beneficiary status in terms of amount, in terms of numbers. The households are getting 45 cedis per month. It's going to be increased to 90. Government will also increase the beneficiaries from 344,185 to a higher number. And this is also going to increase the budget from 197.5 million to 395 million. Aren't these positives we can celebrate even as we undergo some expenditure
but they are not
rationalization?
sufficient to cushion. They are not. They are not.
Are you saying it will not better the livelihoods of those people, those families?
You are looking at the magnitude of the impact and the cushioning intervention. Okay, at the current price development and the outlook for the next 2-3 years. And the possibility that more numbers will fall into that net, realistically, and the efficiency of administering that over a period.
Right.
The good thing I see from this is that government is waking up to the reality that Ghana is in a deep crisis.
Right.
The good thing I see is that even though the burden sharing is disproportionately against households and private sector, government officials are getting away, we can say that some genuine attempt is now being made to address this, no matter how painful it's going to be. To the extent that government took the bold decision and made a U-turn to go to the IMF. And the result of that U-turn, which also occasioned the debt sustainability analysis. But even before government made a call, we had concluded that our debt was unsustainable. In fact, we took on the IMF when in their 2021 Article 4 consultation, were a bit more moderate and diplomatic in classifying our debt position to be sustainable. We were of a different view. Okay. The results of the current DSA is what is triggering uncertainty in the financial market. Debt restructuring. Of course, it's not the first time we are doing debt restructuring. I think we've done it about 6 times also. 1966, I think 72, 78, and then the last one was 2001. But the dynamics of this one is unique compared to the 2001 one, that the 2001 that we did, because of the debt dynamics. Okay, so if you check from 2012. This economy has been going through one form of crisis to the other. And all these things have adverse distributional impact on household firms. Between 2012 and 2015, intense energy crisis. Then from there, we walk straight into financial sector. People realize losses. And we walk straight into COVID-19. Then Russia, Ukraine, and now into austerity.
Right.
It's painful, but I think that when we put everything together, it's better that we take these bitter pills and hope that we come out of it. But the unfortunate thing is the lack of consistency. We have been telling Ghanaians to tighten their belt for so long, and I'm not too sure they had any weight anymore to put on the belt.
Right, Prof. Prior to coming to power, this government said it was going to move our economy from one of taxation to production, and it's been heavily criticized for not doing much in that regard, despite the creation of some one district, one factories. In his presentation, the finance minister admitted that we still do have quite a heavy dependence on imported products, and mentioned that we have the capacity as a country to locally produce items that account for about 45% of our annual imports. They include rice, fish, sugar, poultry, cement, pharmaceuticals, jute bags, computers, etc. Now, he says government will target these products for import substitution by supporting private sector through partnerships with existing and prospective businesses to expand, rehabilitate, and establish manufacturing plants targeted at producing these selected items. He says that our heavy dependence actually creates an unfavorable balance of payments position, pointing out that on average, Ghana's import bill exceeds $10 billion annually. Are you optimistic that this time round we will be able to significantly increase production in this country so as to deal with this aspect of our economy we've been complaining about for a very long time?
Well, on paper, it sounds good, but there's nothing unique in here. We have been hearing this for a couple of decades now. When this government was in opposition, they talked about how they would change the Georgesburg economy. In 6 years, if you check the NDC and their manifestos and budget that they have also presented over the years, you will see all these things. Where is the result? Why are we talking about this in 2023? What was 1D, 1F meant to achieve? Have we achieved that?
Prof, what do you see as the real threat to our desire to become a production and more export-driven economy? What's the real threat?
That is work. And that is sacrifice on the part of leadership to create space and scope for private sector leadership in greater economic transformation and inclusive productivity growth. We are not doing that. So if you tell me that we will reduce import, we'll do this, but you have burdened the private sector with excessive taxation and imposing further restrictions on the growth drivers of the economy. How do you achieve that? I will be looking at your actions on the ground and not the words. That's the issue. So today, inflation is much lower in Côte d'Ivoire and other, even among our regional peers. Check the level of interest rate in those countries compared to Ghana. We are talking about African continental free trade, one big market. But we are not investing and creating fiscal space to accommodate private sector. We are not. You want to do, look, do you know something? So assuming government says that 2023, there will be no interest payment to bondholders. Do you know what that will mean for banks? For banks that have heavily invested in government instruments, even at the current development, if you fair value banks' balance sheet under IFRS 9, they are taking a hit. If you market to market in terms of their exposure in FX, they are taking a hit. Would we say that we must then reduce the capital adequacy ratio in order to wipe out some percentage of their conservation capital buffer in order to absorb these losses?
Prof,
how does that lead to overall soundness and robustness of the financial sector in supporting government economic growth strategy? You will see why government-owned projection for GDP growth in 2023 is lower, 2.8%.
That is true. Just to pick your thoughts
because the austerity in the immediate would have implication for growth. That is why that figure is there.
Right.
Output volatility has implication for consumption volatility, has implication for income volatility and savings mobilization.
Prof, so speaking of that volatility, you've made mention of the fact that you fear for Ghana. You've also said we are heading towards breaking point. You've said we are in a deep crisis. The president himself did acknowledge when he addressed the nation that we were in a crisis. But if you consider, per what Kenneth Oyata says, that our debt stock currently is something around 450 billion, and you decouple what our debt stock was before they took over, which means that we've added on about 330 billion just within these 6 years. What does that mean? And putting that into context, what does it mean when we're expending 339 million Ghana cedis, as of now, over $50 million on a national cathedral? How do you put them together? How do you reconcile them?
I must confess, and I think I've said before, that I have a soft side towards the National Cathedral. Because the idea was that this was going to be off government funding, right? And that the churches were going to come together and all of that. Then when issues about procurement and the selection of the architect and his own position on this LGBT and the rest of them actually put some of us off, right? So under normal circumstances, spending that much relative to the size of the budget and the GDP would not have raised so much concern. But all these things now become more elevated in the light of the current challenges and lack of leadership in resolving it. Leadership that is willing to pay the price. If you say we want to come out of this, leadership must first pay the price. When Jesus said he will save us, he first laid down his life. And that's why we have confidence in following him.
So do you feel it's wrong that we're using state funds, expending state funds on the National Cathedral?
And all of that, and the lack of consistency in the communication and government's own position. And how, because my understanding, the cathedral was supposed to bring all of us together. But as it stands now, that has not happened. Okay, so we need to get back to the drawing board and all of that. And even if government wants to contribute to it, I think that has to be, it doesn't have to be done on the blind side of the public. Right. So we need to look at it. So in the scheme of things, then if you want to prioritize, then people will have issues if that becomes highly elevated. But of course, if the original concept was that the churches, the private sector, or individuals were going to contribute to it and all of that, I think let's stick to that.
Right.
Let's stick to that. That honesty is important.
Prof, so you mentioned for you that cutting down the size of government would have been a better sign of showing commitment to dealing with the economic crisis in the country.
Yes.
And for you, things like, the V8s not, embarking on intercity travels,
50% coupon for fuel.
And all those things are not
difficult to monitor.
Are difficult to monitor. But what's your take on the hamper issue, though? It's not the first time. In 2013, in 2014, we had government announcing to SOEs and MMDCs not to embark on that. This year, it has come up again. Would you say that is also not commendable because you can measure it?
That's not what would cause the market to positively receive the budget. Those don't mean much, actually. And when we are saying, you see, and these are not reforms, these are not growth enhancing. We are saying that the way we have operationalized our democracy is too expensive. The cost of governance is just too expensive. Across central government, state-owned enterprises, it's too expensive. The economy can't sustain that. So what you want to do and what we are asking for is that in addition to an IMF-supported program, Ghana should be pursuing some governance reforms, okay, which may also have implications for the current constitution and what needs to be done in order to all lean towards lean, efficient government. Then, even if you are not able to significantly expand your revenue envelope, because you are running a lean government,
Right.
and you're also pursuing efficiency, that will free up space for growth-enhancing spending or investment. That is what Côte d'Ivoire did when they reduced the number of ministers. Okay, so you could achieve fiscal consolidation predicated on revenue enhancement, a combination of revenue enhancement and then expenditure restraint or rationalization. So you must be looking at expenditure as much as you are looking at raising more revenue.
Right.
And that is why we say that a sport child necessarily does not need more money, but needs discipline as well.
Prof,
So,
please permit me to do this. We'll be wrapping up shortly, though. There are those who are concerned about the posturing of government in all of this. You've had reason to even mention that with the government's decision on when to go to the IMF. I remember when I interacted with some traders at Opera Square, there was one man who raised that concern about the utterances of the president, his posturing and all. People are concerned that at this time, and in the state of what we are experiencing in the country, the president was not here while the budget was being read. He went to visit the Black Stars in Qatar. In fact, on his Facebook page, as he usually will do, there are no highlights of the budget. There are those who feel like, well, it's as if we are on our own in this particular issue. What is your quick thoughts on that? What are your quick thoughts on that?
Really, I don't really have a hard view on that. But I think that at the end of the day, it's not good enough to know as a president that you mean well for your people, but you have to demonstrate. You have to demonstrate that to them. And therefore, individuals will make their own choices and all of that. We have leadership deficit, not only in terms of government, but across the political party. It is not as though when you look to the opposition, we are not seeing commitment. What alternatives are? Okay, how it should be done differently. We are not seeing that. Also, okay. So when you put all of that, because we've seen the NDC in government, we've seen the MPP in government, and all of that. And I think that even political parties must be assessing the risk, because we may be endangering our own democracy.
Okay, so just to conclude the conversation finally, I just saw something, a post by Bright Simmons. I just want to run it by you to find out whether the data is correct and what your take is on that. And then you can wrap with how we can make any good of the Akakpo budget. How can we make any good of it? But before that, so Bright Simmons tweets, the government planned at the beginning of this year to borrow only 8.4 billion Ghana cedis from the Bank of Ghana. It has borrowed more than 34 billion Ghana cedis already. That's about 5-fold. It believes it would have borrowed 42 billion by end of year. According to Bright Simmons, a more realistic figure is 50 billion Ghana cedis. Do you concur? And how can we make any good of this budget? Quickly on that, please.
Yeah, if you check, because the government has been priced out of the international capital market, now we are not only talking about Ghana beyond aid, we are talking about Ghana beyond Eurobond, because we've been priced out. And then you also see that from the domestic market, the government is also being priced out. So actually, it's Bank of Ghana that has kept the government going. And that is why it's reflecting in those numbers going up, as Bryce Simon has captured. Okay.
How can we make any good of this budget?
Yes, I'm sure Bank of Ghana itself hasn't been that comfortable with that monetization of the deficit, as we call it technically. But it appears they do not have a choice, and that has to be done. That is also the reason it's difficult to contain inflation, right? So debt-induced inflation, as we are experiencing, but already the public, the citizens are already paying down the government debt through higher inflation. That's the true interpretation of it. okay, because you can see with the monetization of the deficit, with inflation rising up, actually, there's already a conscious effort to shift the burden of the debt from the state to the citizens through higher price development or inflation.
Right.
Because the idea is that if they monetize the deficit, that jump in inflation effectively represents a form of taxation on your income. Right.
Well, Prof, we're very grateful that you've stayed with us, this long. It gives a very apt reflection of what we have to face moving forward. We're grateful, sir, for your time.
Thank you. God bless you. Have a blessed day.
You too,
Right.
Prof.
And that was an interesting discussion,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
It was an eye-opener on many fronts.
Exactly, on many fronts. But for me, the highlight of this is his response to the question about, could we have done anything but this? And he says, well, this is what we have seen as a result of our inaction
Right.
some 2 years ago.
So we're boxed into a corner, basically.
So this is it.
You don't
So
have
we
any
to
real
deal
choices.
with what we...
You see, when he ends talking about Ghana beyond Eurobonds, so you get the picture.
Yeah.
We're in a very tricky situation, and now we have to fall, for example, a lot more on the central bank, and that in itself has consequences, which we'll have to deal with.
Exactly.
And that, of course, was Professor Godfred Bokpin. He is with the University of Ghana Business School. But right before we take a break and move on with other conversations, I am thirsty already, and you know why? Water is life. It regulates your body temperature and keeps you alive and kicking. Awake is premium purified water treated through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. We have the perfect sizes for all occasions, 330 and 500 ml bottles to fit into your pockets and bags, 750 ml for the heavy drinkers, and 1.5 liters for those who always want more. Bernice is getting into that category right now. We've also introduced our special 19-liter jars for offices and homes. Now, all you need to do, just stay awake with Awake Purified Drinking Water wherever you go. Come on, grab a bottle of Awake Water and get quality hydration. Awake Purified Drinking Water, one for life. Remember, for every bottle you purchase, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center. Now, isn't that heartwarming? It's produced by Casapreco. For bulk purchases, all you need to do, call 0262 351 251. This advert is FDA approved.
Well, and after drinking some water, you need to entertain yourself, right? So you can buy 3 months or 12 months HD Plus subscription on your HD Plus decoder this football season and dial *844 *8# to enter the HD Plus Oricodo Double promo. There are 1,700 rewards to be won, including trips to 3 couples to Dubai in December. Now, isn't that a good one? It's been a hard year, hasn't it? Well, also you can win 65-inch TVs, household appliances, and many more. The promo is valid from now till the 5th of December, and you can just get your HD Plus decoder and give yourself a treat. Well, coming up shortly, Benjamin, we'll be talking to Enterprise Live. There's something coming up tomorrow. That's the... Why are you smiling?
No, I was just thinking...
Oh, this guy is so mischievous.
The income budget to Oricodo.
Well, so it's the Hits FM Schools reunion.
Yep.
And you know how we do it. Anytime old students have to come together and talk about their schools, it's exciting, it's fun. It's a time to reminisce the good old days, isn't it? I'm getting excited. Usually when we have the National Science and Maths quiz, we see a lot of that. But this is a time for all of us.
I've seen some of the names coming. I think I've seen Kwame Eugene. I've seen Eno Baroni. Our very own Andy Dosty. My other twin brother, though we are not related, will be there. So many, a host of, all those people you look forward to seeing will be there. So
and this is a time for you to relax, chill. Who knows, you may find that friend you've been looking for so long. It's interesting sometimes, and I was just having that conversation with someone yesterday, especially for us women, because sometimes marriage changes names and all that. You may be searching for somebody on the internet, you're not inputting the right name, you can't find them. Who knows? You may find them there. So do join us tomorrow at the Elwak Sports Stadium from 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. And we are able to bring you this wonderful program because we've been supported by many organizations, including Enterprise, which is the headline sponsor. So we'll be speaking to them on the packages they have for you and why you need to be there. So do stay. We'll have that conversation shortly.